Another story. Oregon State, Washington State. Remember a couple of days ago they were told that they were the only two, even though the other one still had kind of at least a part of the business, but they were the ones with the votes. This is now the most recent. Before we get to the most recent decision on who has votes or not, here we go. Nicole Arbaugh, Washington Supreme Court entered a temporary stay in the preliminary injunction until the motion for an emergency stay can be ruled upon. During the temporary stay, the TRO, what's that stand for?
Temporary
restraining order granted on behalf of Washington and Oregon State remains in effect. So legally, without getting complicated, what does this mean?
It just means that the remaining 10 Pac-12 teams that asked for a stay of the decision so that Washington State and Oregon State cannot make any decisions until their appeal is heard. So they've appealed to the Supreme Court. The court that they made the ruling granted a stay until the Supreme Court can hear the appeal, and then ultimately Washington State and Oregon State will get to do what they want if the Supreme Court upholds that decision.
It didn't take long to have the ruling come up on Tuesday. It didn't take long for the injunction. Craig?
Yeah, and I don't think the next part will take long either. I think that's right around like in the next few days too, right? So this is like going to be just kind of moving along here. All this was expected, I think, by the people who know protocol. The legal side of things, like the fact that Oregon State, Washington State won the other day, which they did, but it wasn't like what you thought. Like they didn't immediately get all the money, right? Like because then eventually there was immediately that appeal, and that's where we're at this stage now. And so now there's this stay that's granted, which was expected, and so now the next part. And again, the fastest bet for all parties involved is to come to some agreement and not waste any more money or time on lawyers and court battles. But, I don't know. We're not in that room of where they are and as far as how long or how far down the road they are in terms of coming to an agreement. So with no agreement or, settlement, then they move forward in the courts. And so, this was to be expected as the next part of this. And we'll see what the next step is.
So who are they going to play? Oregon State, Washington State. Ross Dellinger with this one earlier today from Yahoo Sports. They are inching closer to agreeing to a 2-year football scheduling alliance with the Mountain West. And the model will have the Mountain West teams play 7 conference games plus 1 game against Oregon State and Washington State. There are details to iron out about non-conference games, but this is going to be a part of it. Now, I don't know what that means for who wins the Pac-12 championship or the Mountain West championship. I would think they're still going to be separate, but at least Oregon State and Washington State will have more games to play than right now is on their schedule, with 10 of the Pac-12 teams leaving for the Big Ten and or the Big 12. So good for them to get that done.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a ways to go here. That's not done. That's that's scheduling talk. I mean, that's just what is looking like it's going to happen. That's not done. That's what's most likely at this stage, and that's not something I think that Oregon State or Washington State fans are all that happy to see, guys. That's not what they want. They want a power spot, and anything less, based on what I've read from the various comments to like John Wilner articles and things, is anything short of that is not going to be acceptable. But I don't know if you get a big, huge chunk of cash, which is being decided right now, as we were just talking about that temporary stay. That's part of the process of eventually getting all that cash or whatever they end up getting. That's still working its way through, and this at least, like, the question is okay, if this court case takes forever and ever, is like, what are you going to do as far as next year? Like, you can't just drag this out for months and months and months, and then like, oh yeah, by the way, we are going to be on our own, and now we got to put together a football schedule. So they're doing their due diligence and coming up with their options, and this was always one that was on the table, some kind of a merger, some kind of a crossover. That's not the ideal scenario, like I said, for the fans that are involved, but it might be the most logical one and the one that fits them best for right now and for the next year or two, and then fast forward to college football and the landscape in a couple years. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know about you guys. I have no idea what 2 years from now will look like in college sports. So, you can revisit it then, or maybe it's just a year. That's the part that needs to be decided fully. But, this is one of, if not the most likely option. And it's not going to be satisfying for a lot of those folks.
Paul, do the math for me real quick. Are they going to get 7 games out of the Mountain West? Are they going to play every team, right?
They could get every.
Yeah.
They could get.
And there's some already that have scheduled either one of those schools for non-conference. So then if you are scheduled to play Oregon State, and let's just say you are Boise State, then you'll play Washington State. So they've got all that. When all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, but very close. Ross Dellinger with the story in Yahoo Sports. Let's see here.
Which that still needs to figure out, like, how would that work as far as the playoff goes?
I don't know. I don't know. But remember what Washington State has said. I think it was Washington State or Oregon State. They will work with the College Football Playoff Committee. Remember, on the new structure of 6-6 or 5-7, but they're going to want something in return. They're going to want something in return. And whatever that is, right now, they just want to have a season.
I think that's a little bit laughable because I'm not sure what they can offer.
It's got to be unanimous.
Oh,
yeah. But
that's the thing.
It has to be unanimous.
There's a whole conversation of like, okay, you are holding up the playoff, and so what do you get in return? Well, here's a seat in the ACC, or here's a seat in the Big 12. This is the theories that are out there, and so that will be your offer. And so you would take that because that is your safety net that you're wanting, is to be in a Power 5 conference, and you will take whatever agreement you can so that you are still in the playoff mix as a power team, and you've got a home, and all that's good. And so that's the idea here, is that you would do that. At the same time, though, like, if you go out there swinging the big stick, like, you got to listen to us because we've got this leverage. Like, everybody else is going to be like, we're going to get you back. It's just a matter of when, not if. And so I don't think that, like, I think there's a lot of Oregon State, Washington State fans that feel like they have nothing to lose, and they're right in some ways, but that because there's that potential holdup that, like, they have all the leverage, and it's like, no, like, everybody could get together and like jettison you from this whole thing at the earliest opportunity if you want to play this game. So it's the little chess match that's going on there is interesting.
I know, but if they agree to 5-7 or 6-6, and Oregon State, Washington State have a vote in it, they have to be unanimous. They're not going to do it just for 1 year. Yeah, they're not going to agree to something just for 1 year, knowing that they can then get like a big knife in the back. So they're not going to get everything, but they got to get something out of this.
Only a 2-year contract on this, so they have to really thread the needle. And if your theory is that they're going to hold it up to make a conference take them, obviously it's a lot more complicated than that, because you're telling a TV network that they're going to have to pay money. You're going to have to tell them, like, there's a lot that you have to do there. So you're the NCAA would, or the college football playoff, if Oregon State wanted that, it's going to have to rely on telling private entities what they're going to do, which clearly they can't. So Oregon State and Washington State can muddy the water for a little while, or gum up the works. But eventually, if you overplay your hand,
you just get overwhelmed.
That's the thing.
They will put you in the shredder.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not just a short term, like, we're going to screw you guys and there's nothing you can do about it. It's like, no, there will be repercussions one way or the other. And they do have leverage. Don't get me wrong. They do have some, but it's not like the total, like, everybody's playing by their rules all of a sudden.
No, they don't get to, like, tell everybody.
But there is like, if they didn't have that, though, like, they would be totally screwed. I mean, there would be like no options on the table. They'd have nothing. So there is that, and the timing is just very fortunate that Kirk Schultz happened to be a part of that. Like, of all the things that have gone wrong, like, the one thing that just kind of ended up fortunate was that you do have that potential holdup. But yeah, like, they still don't know about the money piece now. Like, that's still, like we discussed earlier, part of the deal. So the Mountain West thing, again, always was a potential option. Not official by any means. Looks like it's the kind of leading candidate maybe at this point, just based on the reporting, but still need to see how this goes.
Lawrence Gragston just asked about, hey, is it true about the injunction? Yes, we just mentioned it. Sorry you missed that conversation. We have a reporter who covers Oregon State at 4:30 Central. Softy, he'll join us on Washington and Oregon State. He'll join us here in about 15 minutes.
No one should freak out about the injunction.
No.
It doesn't really change
in the end,
much.
It's all going to end up probably what it was going to end up in the first place, except lawyers get a lot of money.
You just don't get all that money and get to start spending it right away and spending it as though it's yours.
Yes.
Like, that's the thing, is just everything just kind of remains as is. You're still in control of it, but you can't start ripping it away and throwing it everywhere that you want to.
Here are the scenarios in the Pac-12 for this weekend. Washington can clinch a spot with a win at Oregon State, which would be a huge win anyway, or Utah beats Arizona. Oregon can clinch a spot with a win over Arizona State, and Washington beats Oregon State, and Utah beats Arizona. Oregon State stays in contention with a win over Washington or wins by both Utah over Arizona and Arizona State over Oregon. Arizona must beat Utah to stay in contention. Utah must beat Arizona and have both Washington beat Oregon State and Arizona State beat Oregon to stay in contention. Unless they decide to change the rules and they talk to the Big 12 about how in the world can we make this happen.
So here's what the Pac-12 probably really needs to have happen. None of that stuff below Washington and Oregon, because otherwise they're not in the college football playoff. Like, basically, if any of that stuff happens, they're going to find themselves, sadly, even though they're the best league this year, on the outside looking in.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you obviously are hoping playoff-wise for a Washington-Oregon championship game. I think as football fans, we'd all like that as well, although you could convince me that Oregon State, Oregon, or, some other combination. I don't even know what all combinations would still be. I guess there's a lot of it sorted out there. But, I mean, Washington-Oregon's the big marquee matchup. Based on where those two teams are right now. But, yeah, Oregon State can still very much play spoiler. I mean, they've got both those teams coming up to close out the season. So they've got a chance to really be the chaos makers here. And so, yeah, that's going to be a really fun game coming up this weekend with Oregon State and Washington State, because that could be a big wrench thrown into this little graphic here. But Oregon-Washington should be the favorites to probably end up in the long run. But, again, that could be interrupted. I'm just amazed to see Arizona in contention. They're in the top 25. Now, the only bad part is now you hear Jed Fish being brought up as like, well, what about him at such and such school, which is understandable because of the job he's done so far. But, with them coming to the Big 12, that's good to see because they were not a factor, I think, in anybody's thinking as far as like what they'd bring football-wise. That was a basketball conversation most of the time. And then Utah, I mean, just given the ups and downs they've been dealing with injury-wise and the no Cam Rising, Brent Keithy all year long, the fact that they're still hanging around and have a chance here with a couple weeks to go is pretty amazing. I mean, even if it is a small chance, it's still just a testament to the strength of that program. So, yeah, those are going to be a couple of schools like right now that have a great trajectory heading into the Big 12, and then a lot of chaos potentially at the top. But Oregon State's going to be the team to watch here over these next couple weeks because they play both Washington and Oregon. So.
Well, we'll discuss a lot of that with Softy from KJR in Seattle, so get your earmuffs on or get ready if you have hearing aids on. Turn them down because